Chapter 20. "Unbelievable, girl. That stepmother of yours has gripped you by the throat," Martha said, placing her hands on her hips. Cindy laughed. Martha couldn't have said it any better than Cindy herself. She stared at the painting she'd placed behind the wall, the one Ida had stolen from Caspian. As soon as she'd returned to Farrington, she headed home. She needed to ensure that Ida had lost her advantage. The painting was hidden in her room, but Cindy had easily located it. Now she just needed to prove that she hadn't stolen it to begin with. It had been 24 hours since she'd run away, and her wedding was supposed to start in approximately 6 hours. She didn't believe for a moment that her stepmother cared for her safety, but she knew Ida must have been furious that Cindy had ruined her plans. She was a little concerned about Ida's magical power. She had no idea what her stepmother was capable of in order to get what she wanted. "Well, yes, indeed. But once I figure out how to clear my name, she'll end up in prison where she belongs," Cindy said. Martha kept pushing her to see the king, but Cindy wasn't certain if she was ready to tell him everything. She still had no evidence that her stepmother had made arrangements with someone in the castle. Last night, after retrieving the priceless piece, she'd managed to locate the brothel. She didn't quite remember how she'd gotten there with Martha during the night of the ball. Some drunken peasant finally led her in the right direction. She'd found Martha at the bar, and, as usual, the magical prostitute had been a bit drunk. Martha's loud burp brought her back to the present. Cindy was glad she'd had a good night's sleep. All the ladies made her feel at home. "I need to have a drink before my brain can function properly," she told Cindy, and then pulled out a bottle of rum from under the bed. "Oh, that's a pleasant surprise. I thought I finished this earlier on. I think you could do with a drink, too." "Good idea," Cindy said, wanting to stop thinking of her troubles. She had to find a way to counter her stepmother's spell and tell the king the truth. Currently, Martha had no idea how to help her, and she'd never heard of that sort of magic. Martha took a few generous gulps of rum, and then handed the bottle to Cindy. It baffled her that today was her wedding day, and she wished for the time to move more quickly. Cindy was grateful for everything Martha had done for her, but she knew she had to act swiftly. She was considering seeing red, but she knew Ida had most likely travelled back to Farrington. It was too soon to tell, but Cindy didn't want to risk bumping into her. Ida had lost her main bargaining chip, the painting. "We need to head to the castle right away," Martha said, and then threw another pretty dress at her. This one was cream and had a small corset around the waist. "I'm not certain if we should head through the official entrance. General Davies hates me. Besides, my stepmother's magic is preventing me from saying anything at all," Cindy said, and Martha frowned as though she wanted to agree with her, but instead she said, "We'll figure something out then and there. I said I would get you to the ball, and I did. Stop worrying about it now and put on that dress. You must look presentable. The king needs to see you. If I had been in your position, I would have been upfront about your past and Londis from the very beginning." Cindy hated talking about her past. Some ladies in town called her names, spit at her feet, and men mocked the fact that she'd been involved with such a womanizer. Mr. Johnson mentioned that he could help her, but Cindy knew her situation was complicated. Most people had already made up their mind about her. She couldn't change that. On the other hand, Martha was right. She needed to lay out the whole truth to Caspian. She stripped and changed into the beautiful dress quickly enough. She tossed her old clothes into the basket, applied a bit of makeup on her face, and instantly felt better. Last night, all the girls in the brothel had been busy. Despite the reputation of the place, Cindy noticed that the bar was full of men, all looking to pay for pleasure. She recognized a few from the market, so it seemed not everyone were as loyal as they made themselves out to be. The girls were thrilled to see her again, and they asked her what happened with the prince once she arrived at the ball. She took turns telling them about the king and Londis. The girls were sympathetic and told her that she'd made the right decision to run away. "Darling, please remember us when you become queen. We would love to visit you some day," Melanie said, and then slapped one of the customers who was attempting to grab her breast. "Not now, Ricky. You still owe me cash for a blowjob from 2 nights ago." Cindy was amused by the girl's statement, thinking that Melanie was getting a bit ahead of herself. "Queen? I don't know if I'm ready for that just yet. I'm only going to the castle to speak to him." Heat rushed through her body at the thought of seeing him. She missed Caspian and could no longer deny her feelings. "He's going to want to sleep with you as soon as he lays eyes on you. He won't be able to keep his hands off you," Martha chuckled, appearing by the bar, wearing a black cloak. "Let's all calm down. The king is searching for a wife," she told Martha, who already looked a little tipsy. "I always thought Caspian was good-looking and the sex. You shouldn't have run away from a man like that. We'll go to the castle and ask to speak to him, and then once he sees you, he'll change his mind right away." Cindy nodded, knowing there was no point in arguing with Martha. She knew better, and she wanted her to be happy again. All the girls wished her good luck, and then she and Martha left for the castle. It was midday, and Cindy had been up for hours, but the girls had worked all night, so most of them had slept until late. The market was open today, so the roads were much busier than usual. Martha knew a lot of people in town, especially men, but Cindy didn't think the women liked her very much. Many of them were shooting her infuriating glares as she passed, and one of them even spit in front of her as they walked by. "The women in town don't approve of me either," Cindy pointed out, as Martha smiled to some older peasant standing by his horse. "Don't worry about them. They hate me too, because I've slept with most of those women's husbands, and they can't stand it," she said, and then laughed. "Come on, I want to stop in the tavern first. The barman there owes me a drink. Maybe we can learn of some new gossip from the castle." Cindy should have suspected that Martha wasn't planning to head to the castle straight away. She could do with a strong drink, too. Her courage was wearing off a bit, and she knew this was going to be a difficult conversation. The castle could be seen from the distance, and the view made Cindy a little uneasy. She'd ruined her stepmother's plans, but what if she was too late? Perhaps the king was over her being so indecisive. If he only knew that she was trying to avoid prison and was affected by her stepmother's magic. Cindy was surprised to find the tavern filled with customers at this time of day, and nearly everyone in there knew Martha. She went up to the bar straight away, smiling and hugging all the men there. Cindy was attempting to play the conversation with the king over and over in her head. "Hey, Cindy, I haven't seen you in ages. Would you like a drink?" Someone shouted from the other side of the tavern. Cindy was a little taken aback to see Charles, the forest ranger, walking up to her, and she was even more surprised that he saw her in the tavern. He was smiling, and before she knew it, he was standing beside her table. Cindy never had much interaction with him, other than the few times he'd made passes at her at the market. He and Red had been seeing one another off and on for some time. Seeing his face reminded her of when she'd been desperate enough to walk to his home to see if he'd accompany her to the ball. Thank the heavens above that hadn't worked out. Otherwise she would have never met Martha. It seemed as though Martha wasn't going to stop with only one drink, and Cindy thought that perhaps she could chat with him for a little while. She believed the least she could do was attempt to tell him that he needed to stop messing around and finally commit to Red. "Yes, that would be good," she replied. 5 minutes later, Charles returned with a glass of wine, looking cheerful. They began talking about the ball and his work for the king. Cindy sipped her drink, attempting to relax a bit. Martha was surrounded by men who kept buying her more rum. She was laughing and joking with them, and Cindy wondered how long she was planning to stay here. Charles finally admitted to her that he still loved Red, and he wouldn't be able to find a girl like her anywhere else. Cindy smiled. satisfied that at least her friend was happy, then stood from her seat and went to the powder room, feeling dizzy all of a sudden. The world around her started spinning, but someone caught her before she fell to the floor. "Don't worry, beautiful. I've got you," said a voice that Cindy instantly recognized as Charles. Her limbs were tingling, and she felt as if she was going to pass out. She wanted to call Martha, but then realized she couldn't speak. Seconds later, darkness swallowed her, and she drifted off, thinking something about this situation didn't feel right at all. "You want my memories of her?" the king asked with disbelief. The old witch had saved his life 20 years ago, and now she wanted him to sacrifice something from the past. He thought she would give him a task, or at least ask for payment this time around. "I'm taking away what you don't need anymore, if you want to love this girl," she said, smiling. The king noticed that the old witch was slower than usual. "Do you know how I can locate her?" he asked. That was necessary, he told himself, realizing that he was back in the castle, inside his chamber. He shook his head, bringing himself back to the present. What had happened with the witch earlier on was unexpected. "What was that, my lord?" Constant, his advisor, asked, and when the king glanced at him, he should have remembered he wasn't alone. He needed to calm down, otherwise he would drive himself mad. He couldn't change what had already happened. Constant came in to tell him that Jeremy was coming to see him. Apparently, the boy had some news. "Come closer. Come, come, and I will show you where she is." He heard the witch's voice in his head again. He remembered approaching the large pot filled with crystal clear water, smelling blood everywhere, as the craving for Cindy's blood was making him uncomfortable. The witch gestured for him to lean over the pot, and for a second, the king wasn't seeing anything. Then the water began bubbling, and he could see his Cindy. She was carried out of the local tavern by a man who wore the forest ranger uniform. 2 girls were waiting for him at the edge of the forest. He smiled at them, and they pointed for him to place Cindy in the carriage. They exchanged some money, and then the image began to fade away. Someone's voice in the chamber reminded him that he needed to focus on the present. He had given the old witch his most precious gift, in exchange for Cindy's location and their future together. Time was precious for the king, and he didn't want to waste another minute of it waiting around. "Tell me what you discovered right away," he said to Jeremy as he barged into his chamber a second later. The boy took a few deep breaths and started talking. "I followed him like you asked me, keeping a safe distance for a little while, and you were right, my lord. Then I went to the lady's estate and searched for the painting as you asked, my lord, but I couldn't find anything. The lady must have hidden the painting, or she moved it to a different location. Also, your other suspicions were accurate too. Cinderella's stepmother is forcing her into marriage with that Londis farmer. I hid in the bushes and listened to them when they were just about to leave for the Garland's kingdom. Cindy's father left her stepmother Ida in charge of the whole estate, but he put some sort of clause in the will that only gave Ida full ownership if Lady Cindy fails to marry a respectable man and secure an income," Jeremy said, pausing for a second to catch his breath. The king thought the boy had done well to obtain this information for him. Now Caspian was glad he'd gone with his gut. Cindy was being blackmailed into this marriage in order to avoid prison. He was surprised she didn't tell him about it at the ball, but he understood her fears after he learned the truth about her. "Her stepmother had help, and she managed to track Cindy down a few hours ago," Jeremy continued. "She announced that Cindy is going to be punished for running away. Londis is planning to flog her, and Ida approved it. But that's not all. She's forcing her into this marriage to make sure she gets the estate. She also said that she would spread a rumour around the kingdom that Cindy worked in the local brothel. The girl was seen with other prostitutes the night of the first ball, and Ida has a witness. I've been hanging around these people all day and heard bits and bobs from her stepsisters too. Ida had someone create a document that listed Cindy's name on the lease of the brothel. Her stepmother knew that once Cindy's reputation was in tatters, you wouldn't want to marry her. The king clenched his fists, shaking his head as anger flew through his veins. He picked up his cloak, ready to kill someone. This woman, Cindy's stepmother, was pure evil. My lord, where are— Not now, Constant. I have a wedding to stop. The sooner someone confronts that evil woman, the better. It's a complete disgrace. The king roared, already running through the corridors, with Constant right behind him. He shouldn't have wasted his time with the old witch. Now he wasn't certain if he would make it back to Garland's kingdom in time to stop that falsehood of a wedding. It was a few hours' ride to the other kingdom. He should never have let her run away from him. He entered the stables and jumped onto his white horse straight away. Cindy was unfortunate, and her father should have known that Ida couldn't be trusted. That woman only cared about her own interests. My lord, wait, who is this woman? Constant asked. He was red-faced and holding his chest as though he was struggling to keep his balance. She's the love of my life. Prepare the castle and pray for me, because I hope that I can make it to the other kingdom in time to stop that damn ceremony.